Smite 2 is more than just Smite. Smite 2 is our chance to go back, take all the learnings from 10 years of making Smite into one of the most successful multiplayer games of all time, and do it all strictly better. Not just better in some ways and worse in others, but undeniably better.
But is it? That, my friends, is exactly the question we're going to be talking about today. Because up until this point, I've seen it as a bit of a false promise. I showed you that clip at the beginning of this video because it was the quote that I remembered most as Smite 2 is being announced. It had me excited in a way that I couldn't describe. I spent a decade of my life since I was a young teenager playing Smite, so to not only see its next iteration coming to life before me, but to hear Hi-Rez tell us that they would be learning from their time and mistakes and make this game strictly better, well, that really stuck with me. Gone were the days of trial and error for so many core parts of the game. They could simply balance so many things, so many pain points well from the jump this time. However, they seem to have missed that mark. So today we're going to talk about those missed marks. But before we do, I just want to say that I am a huge fan of Smite, and this is in no way just a negative video for no reason. The only reason I'm making this video is to point out certain points of this game that I don't understand why they're making mistakes on when they already have the experience to do them right the first time. I do love this game, and I just want to see it flourish, so I'm only ever going to make things in a positive enough light to shed light on these things that I think are going wrong in hopes that they can get better. On top of that, the video is very intense with the title, obviously. It's mostly just because, you need a good video title nowadays, I'll be honest. And I wrote that video title and I was like, dang, that's kind of sexy. So, that's mostly why the video is titled that. But anyways, but all that said, I think we can start talking about some of these mistakes, starting with starting off here, and we're going with something that's already might be quite contentious. I mean, I don't actually know the entire community sentiment on this Sundering arc, as it's called now, or if you're a Smite old head, as you would probably call it, Hog, Hand of the Gods, because back in the day, we had this exact relic, and what it did is you went up and it just stole a camp, or a Gold Fury, or a Fire Giant. Whatever the objective was, it could instantly secure it. And that is exactly what Sundering Arc is doing right now. I actually think Hog was a consumable at some points too, if not at all points. I kind of forget a little bit. It's been a while since it's been in the game because guess what? It's overpowered. And honestly, I think it's very low skill. That's something for me personally that I always go back to because I like to see higher skill gap type things in the game. And a lot of things I'll talk about on this list today go into that point exactly. I think this is low skill because it enables people to come in, not actually have to secure objectives with their well-timed abilities or auto attacks. Instead, it makes it to where you're just securing by pressing one button. And I don't think that's a good skill check, and I don't think that's a good thing to put in the game. Because when you remove skill, sure, it might add more fun, especially for beginner or lower skill players. And I don't think that those players shouldn't be able to have fun and enjoy the game, but I do think that if you want a higher tier player base to be capable of going into the game and flourishing and actually sustain themselves in the long term, then you can't have things like this running amok. Now, after that, we're gonna lead into something else. I think these actually go negatively when it comes to bigger objectives such as Gold Fury and especially Fire Giant. Because when it comes to Sundering Arc, who are you mainly seeing it built on? Well, it's gonna be the tanks, it's gonna be your supports and your solo laners, although other roles are building this just because it's very strong right now. But in my opinion, the job of those solo laners and the supports should be two things around those big objectives. One, it's going to be to actually aggro those objectives. Now, this is a little different nowadays because you have the Naga camp, which does help you aggro, but for the most part, if you're the tank, you're supposed to be aggroing, keeping that actual Fire Giant from hitting your teammates too much so they don't get too low. Secondarily, usually your solo laner and or your jungler, but let's go with solo laner in this part, is going to be doing the actual zoning of those objectives. So the enemy team can't just stroll in and steal that objective from right under your beautiful little nose. Now, if you're just too focused on securing that objective, over focusing on it with your Sundering Arc, then you might not do your job as well as the zoning and actually tanking for your team. Especially now with Fire Giant, where it has certain attacks that are very widespread, a huge cone attack that puts a big field of fire down. If your support is not paying attention, that could be placed on top of all of your squishies, instantly taking a lot of health off of them. Now, next up, I want to talk about invade meta, because that is what this actual relic is going to lead to, and we're already seeing that right now in Smite 2. People are invading at level 1, and this wasn't a problem in Smite 1 for a long time, because a while ago, Hi-Rez said, hey, listen, we're going to solve this problem, because what does invade metas lead to? Well, they lead to snowballing, and snowballing has been a historic problem in Smite. Nobody likes the invade metas because they lead to snowball metas, and nobody likes the snowball metas because it makes the enemy team too strong right off the bat, and oftentimes to a point where you can't fight back into them if they have a good squad picked out as well. So that's my problem with it. On top of just the regular objectives and how easy they are to secure for those lower skills, well, it's just going to make it harder with those invade metas. It's going to make that snowball come all over the place. And I don't know why did I phrase it like that? Coming all over the place? Not the point, but I think we need to bring back the Invader's Curse. They already had this problem solved with that exact mechanic. And the reason they brought it into the game was to curtail these actual invade metas. So you can't just walk into the enemy's jungle because you're slowed, you have less power. And not to mention in Smite 1, there's actually a mechanic where if you take the enemy's jungle, it's worth less to you. Especially, I believe, in the early parts of the game. I believe that does reduce later on, and the actual enemy jungle is worth more to you later on. I could be wrong about that, but I know early on in Smite 1, those enemy jungle camps aren't worth as much to you. So the invading is actually put down and not encouraged in a lot of ways. So that's the first thing that we needed to cover here. But with that out of the way, let's go ahead and move on to. Now, this section is where the heart of the video really comes from, because we see here an issue that should never have had to have been addressed and have time wasted on it by Hi-Rez. And that's worrying, because they come here and they claim this game is going to be strictly better. We're learning from everything we've done in the past 10 years. Okay, then why were the towers so worthless at the beginning of this alpha? Why? Why were they ever not balanced to a point? You do internal testing all the time. You have your Olympians and whoever else go in there and test for you. Why were these towers ever so weak? Now, if you go to the Smite 2 patch notes, which is coming out on Tuesday, you'll see they're raising the tower health and the tower, so the actual damage these things are going to do. Also, the penetration percentages and the overall protections on the tier 1 towers, on the Phoenixes, and the tier 2 towers, by the way, on all of it. So tier 2, tier 1, tier 2, and the Phoenixes. That's great. Now, what else are they doing? They're taking away the gold bounty from being as much from these actual towers. And we're going to get to that in a second too, because I want to talk about gold and XP and how it's spooling into the game right now. But first of all, I don't need to go on this point for too long because I'm hoping that the actual buff to these towers will be enough, and it will make them strong enough to where they don't just get knocked down in the first 5 to 8 minutes of a game if you're actually defending them quite well. Because the next thing is the actual gold and XP. I think it's a little light right now, especially if you are jungling. I think the jungle is a little light, and that loops back to when we were talking about the Sundering Arc, because it makes it even easier to steal that jungle farm. So even if you're a good jungler and you're going around right now, it kind of feels like the waves are maybe just worth enough to keep you at a good pace in this game, especially as I started learning how to farm in Smite 2, which is pretty similar but a little less intuitive, I would say, than Smite 1. You have to actually be on top of things a lot more, in my opinion, and know when to rotate. In those early on waves, you really can't rotate, in my opinion, because they're worth so much gold that you just should not be doing it. But with that, we have something called tower bounties. You can see those 3 pips on my tower right now. And when you take those, what do you get? Well, you get gold. And a lot of gold at that. So the tier 1 bounties now, they're not going to be worth as much, right? They're going to go down to 15. The blue bounties are going to go to 30 from 80. That's a lot of gold that you can't just leave on the ground. You're going to see right now, I'm going to pick these up. And the thing is, just your minions can drop those. Maybe a good balancing point would be to where if you want to get tower bounties, you have to be the one to do the hit to the tower, or be hitting it within the last 10 seconds, let's say, or else those tower bounties don't drop. That would be a good balancing point to make sure that you are actually the one taking those bounties instead of the minions just dropping them and you getting a big reward for it. Now, on top of that, I want to talk about split pushing. Now, you've heard me talk about this before. I've gotten flack for talking about this before, but I'm not going to change my opinion because just like with the Sundering Arc, I think it is a low skill way to play the game. In my opinion, I think the way that you win a Smite match should be that you go in, you win a high skill team fight between each team, and you come out on top because you use your abilities right, you positioned right, you guys had a good strategy, whatever it was, you won that team fight, and for that you got to push down, get a fire giant, get the birds, get the titan, and that's how it should be to win a Smite match. But with the towers being so squishy as they have been, and especially the Phoenixes, people have been using that opportunity to just split push, especially when the minions have been worth so much gold and you're getting all these tower bounties. It's kind of like, why would I rotate? There is no reason to rotate when you can just go in, play PvE the entire time, hit tower, hit tower, hit tower, get Phoenix. And hey, a lot of the times, and I think you guys have probably noticed this in your Smite 2 matches as well, You don't even have to be there to get a Phoenix. I was playing a match just yesterday, and we went and we got the middle Phoenix. We were going looking around, seeing what we wanted to get next after doing a big team fight and getting the Fire Giant. We looked at the map and we noticed we had all 3 Phoenixes. I went back, I clipped that moment of the game, the last 5 minutes. And what I saw was something that I've seen a lot in Smite 2, which is if you have these waves of minions, they go in and they purely solo a Phoenix. That should never be happening. The purpose of a minion wave when it comes to taking a tower or a Phoenix should not be that it can do the entire thing by itself in one go. It should be that they can tank some of the actual hits from that tower or Phoenix for you and take down the backdoor protections. Because when it's balanced like this instead, there's just no point for you to do anything except for push those waves, run away, go get more farm in the jungle, run back, do more waves, and then while they're dealing with that and their entire Phoenix is getting taken down by a minion wave, you just go do objectives? That's minion management, sure, I agree, but the problem is minions are just running it down by themselves, and if you actually rotate 2 team fights when you should be, to be honest, because you're a good player, you know, hey, this is a good team fight for me to rotate to, because after this, we can go ahead and we can take this actual second Gold Fury, let's say, and now our team will be better off for that. Well, maybe not, because then 2 lanes, the solo laner and the mid laner, they didn't rotate to that fight that you guys did in the duo. And so now they took your tier 1 in mid lane and solo. They got all that bounty from those towers, and they also got the gold camps and the mid gold buff and any camps on that side of the jungle if they were good about it. That's a lot that you're just losing there. And honestly, the gold differential would not even be in your favor for the most part, or would barely be. And I think that's kind of a problem right now. So what I want to see is hopefully this actual buff to the towers is worth it. Hopefully it keeps these towers alive longer, and actually reducing the gold on the minions I think is good, and actually bringing down the bounty amount from that gold is good as well. Because at the end of the day, this split pushing needs to be stopped. At the end of the day, we should go into a Smite match, and the way we know we're going to win it is because we're going to go in, we're going to have a nice team fight, and whoever outskills the other, that's who wins the game. And since we're talking about these objectives, that leads us perfectly into our next point, which is going to be about... Now, I think we've all noticed that the Titans in Smite 2 are absolute cheeks. And I know you're thinking, but Roger, your cheeks are absolutely amazing. And yes, they are, but I don't mean my cheeks. I mean like a guy's cheeks who hasn't gotten off his couch in the past 10 years. Yeah, you thinking about those flabby suckers? Exactly. Now, that's what the Titans are feeling like in Smite 2 right now. They fall down way too easily, and they do a decent amount of damage to you, but other than that, they're kind of a joke. Most games, you can walk in while having 1 Phoenix cleared and probably having at least 2 tier 2 towers still up on the other lanes, and you can still clap the Titan. Enemies are going in and just ignoring you so they can just kill the Titan, because if you can't kill them fast enough, they can destroy it in a few seconds. It feels akin to walking in and killing the Bull Demon King on Smite 1, to be honest with you, with about 4 players there. You smack it pretty quickly, it was a tiny bit of a challenge, and if somebody walks up, you can kind of shoo them off in a second and still take the objective. And that's never what the Titan should be, because at the end of it, that's what your entire game hinges on. That is the goal that your enemy is trying to knock down to get that dub. And when that thing can't actually protect itself, let alone have you protect it, then that is incredibly wrong. One thing you'll notice when you go read these first patch notes coming out in Smite 2 here is that it says nothing about the Titan. We got a buff on the tier 1, tier 2 towers and the Phoenixes, but we got nothing about the Titan. Not a single word spoken about it, which I think is quite odd, especially when you keep going and you look at the fact that Titans right now aren't healing at all. They barely heal. When the Phoenixes come up, that is supposed to be the time when Hi-Rez says, good job, you defended your base, your Phoenixes came back up, and for that, you are rewarded with your Titan, the thing that keeps you from losing this game, healing, and you say thank you, because that keeps you back in that game. On top of that, if the enemies make the mistake of walking in and out of your Titan room, and all of them disengage, it heals the Titan. That's just another safeguard in place to make it to where your Titan doesn't simply fall over like a toddler skipping along the sidewalk, but they just are right now, and I think that's really sad. I have to assume that this is just something they haven't coded in for some reason, but to me, that's just a weird mistake. Like, you're talking about learning and making this game strictly better, and one of the biggest things when it comes to defending your base and staying alive in the game, you didn't have in once you were putting it out to the general public. I think that's very odd, and they need to get on this ASAP. But that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about something a little more niche next, but something I think we all want back, which is... yeah, That's right, why can't we walk our camps out of their ranges anymore, out of their spawn zones? That was such a nice addition to Smite 1. Suddenly in, what was it, Season 9, Season 10, whatever the heck it was, we could go ahead, take our actual camps out of their zones. That led to so many unique starts. Finally, you could go to dual lane. You could take the green and the purple, group them up, do them both at once, get a bunch of golden XP, and then with that extra clear, just go straight to lane, and it felt really nice. Suddenly the jungler was starting with the mid laner, and they were bringing the yellow and the red to each other, doing that, then going to the other yellow, and then going to lane and going to the other jungle stuff. It made sense. It felt good. You felt like you were making such good progress early and starting the game off at a good speed. But for some reason, in Smite 2, they're making these camps to where they're stuck in their own spawn zones again. It feels weird, and just like all these things where they say they're learning and they're going to make it strictly better, it feels like we're going backwards. And that's what I don't get. And again, that's the whole point here. Why are you going backwards? Now, the next point I'm going to make, on top of getting these camps actually leashed out, is the green buff. We waited so much of Smite's lifespan to get a dedicated buff for the supports. And this might sound random, but I'm a support main. I always have been. I've been playing a lot of mid now because honestly support doesn't feel that good. In Smite 2, if you're trying to go like the traditional tanky support, unless you're going like a damage support, in which case obviously that feels good because bruisers are OP right now. That's a different video for a different day. But the point is, I want my freaking green buff back. Where did it go, Hi-Rez? Did Shrek walk in and say, no, that's Shrek green, that's copyrighted, you can't use that? And you guys just said, oh, well, we can't use a different color of green, guess we'll just scrap the whole buff. What do you mean? And you can argue that, hey, you don't need a dedicated support buff because there's a buff camp in the duo lane. There's a third buff camp that you fight over in between the actual purple buffs. And I understand that, and I think that's a good argument, and that's why I thought it up, because I'm a smart guy. Yeah, that's why I passed second grade. Not third, but we don't need to talk about that. The point is, I don't just want another red buff to spawn or another purple buff to spawn. I want a support buff. I want the buff that goes on me, that when I'm near my teammates, it gives them benefits, it gives me protections. Whatever you want to make it, just make me my own support buff. Because at the end of the day, you're just making me feel like I'm not a dedicated role just like the other four, because I don't deserve a little belt around me? I don't think so, because I'm a skinny guy and my pants will fall down. So give me that green belt and we'll be very happy with each other. But now that we have that covered, let's move on to the next point, which is... honestly, this has been one of the biggest problems since the very first weekend that we got our hands on the Smite 2 Alpha, up until right now when it's been 24/7, because wards have been screwy as all heck. Now, again, they are addressing this in the new patch, and they're going to be bringing them to parity with Smite 1, which is just a fancy word for saying they're going to be the same amount of time, which is 180 seconds of lifetime, just like in Smite 1. They'll also give you 50 gold when you kill them. Cool. Why weren't they like that to begin with? And you may be asking that. You may be saying, Roger, why are you bringing this up if they're already fixing it? That's my point. That's why I am bringing this up. Because why was this a problem to begin with? Why do we have to get this fixed right now? Why weren't they the same wards to begin with? And let me hit you with this really quick. Because nowadays, since they want to be like League of Legends more and more every single day, there's grass all over the map that gives you invisibility. You can just sit in that, and the enemies can't see you. And the entire point of before, where it was, ooh, well, we're giving you a free ward. Instead of you buying them, we give you a free ward. That was one of the balancing points for this grass, so you could snuff people out of it. But now we went back to buying wards, which, to be honest with you, I think is better. I do want to be able to buy my wards. I don't want them set as a little button. I want to buy them. And then you see that they lasted a minute. Why? Why would they last a minute? On top of that, I don't know if it's just me, but I'll say this, the map feels big now. It feels bigger than it did in Smite 1, and these wards feel not big enough. They feel like they don't cover enough area. So you take all that together, and wards were just the most frustrating experience, and this has been a problem ever since Smite 2 started. But again, that's the entire point here. How were they so mishandled so many times until finally you see what happens? And you're going to see this keep happening because it's what Hi-Rez goes back to. They say, hey, here's a good idea. It's like someone in the boardroom cooks this up after months. They go, guys, I cracked the code. Let's make it like it was in Smite 1. Yeah. No doy, because guess what? You took a decade of balancing in Smite 1 and you put things to their proper places. That's why they worked in Smite. So put them to how they were in Smite 1 when it's something as simple as wards, because they need to last that long. They need to be purchasable, and they need to be good, because they're a huge part of any MOBA. So just make them good, Hi-Rez, like you finally are. Now with that out of the way, why don't we talk about something else that's given me a massive headache since this alpha has started. Now, again, we're going to be talking about an issue here that Hi-Rez actually is addressing, but I definitely wanted to bring this one up because I was thinking about this for like the past week, for the most part, basically the past 2 weeks, ever since the alpha has started here, because I've been trying to play ranked. I wanted to at first. I was like, I want to play ranked. Of course, there's this whole new rank system. You can get up to these new roles. You know, you're starting in clay now. What a fun little thing. Everyone wants to try to grind up on that, right? Well, you can't if you're in a 2-stack or you're in a 3-stack. Well, you could, but it would take you forever. Point 1. There was no matchmaking. That's still a problem. That's going to get addressed in time, so I'm not getting too angry about that, and that's not my point at all. My point is the amount of people you can put into a queue. The amount of time I was stuck in these queues with my 2-stack was anywhere from 5 minutes to upwards of 13 minutes. Do you know how frustrating it is to sit in a 13-minute queue to then get into a lobby where somebody inevitably is going to dodge because they don't get their role or their god, or you're going to get into that match and then somebody rage quits or DCs, or your team is just total freaking cheeks and you just get slapped around anyways, so you just wasted about an hour of your life and you only got one worthless match? Yeah, it's very frustrating, and that's been my ranked experience so far. But what I wrote down weeks ago when I was thinking about this was, hey, what are you doing? You already have the solution in Smite 1. That's why you locked it to duo queues at most, because it made sense and it kept things balanced in the actual ranked playlist. And so I said, put it back to 1s and 2s can queue into ranked, and then put a 5-man playlist so those big groups can still queue. And lo and behold, what do I see when I open this Smite 2 patch notes? That exact thing. So I'm going to put it up on screen for you, because right now you'll be able to queue up as a group of 1 or 2, and those will get queued into each other in ranked, and then you'll do the 5s. Now they say they're still working on it. Maybe 3s and 4s will return in the future, and maybe with a bigger player pop in the future that could work. But right now it is a absolute mess, and they just need to stick to what they know works with these 1s and 2s. And if they want to try out the 5-man stacks, I think that's completely fine, and I want them to. Again, I had that written down because that's what I think they should do, and that's so good to see they're doing it. But it brings me back to the whole point of this video, which is, Hi-Rez, why are we here in the first place when you already know this doesn't work like this? You already know what your matchmaking can achieve with ranked, so just keep it simple, because you're going too far into a point that's just going to ruin matchmaking even more. If you want to experiment, do it in maybe a year from now when you have a big player pop and we're in full release or something. But now's not the time when we're in a closed alpha and we just want to have fun. That being said, I think we're ready to get to our next point, which might be a controversial one. It's also our last one, so let's go ahead and talk about the return of Face Punch Crit Amir. Could that really be a bad thing? Yes. Yeah. No, it definitely could be. Now, here's the thing. Back in Smite 1, we had this same system where they said any god can build any item. And that's why their little transition there said all gods, all items, because that's where we are right now. And that's what Hi-Rez wants. And let me be clear, I'm not actually against that for the most part. When I think about it, I think it opens up a lot of build possibilities, and some that I have had fun with. When I came back to making Smite 2 content the other day, what did I do? I did a full intelligence Kernanos build. It was really fun. Smacking my 2 out there on Kernanos, my Bramble Blast, and doing like half of a squishy's health felt hilarious and amazing and honestly pretty balanced. But there's those outliers, like that Crit Amir. When he can get on you and you're just 1v1ing him, he will smack you a lot of the time. You can counter that for sure, but there's other things like Crit Soul, which is running the meta right now. She's being banned a lot. She just feels very oppressive, and Hi-Rez is nerfing crit as a whole to counter that. Will that work? I don't know. And is it fair to nerf crit as a whole for those regular ADCs just because this magical ADC is getting the best of it? I'm not sure, and that's kind of where I'm thinking about this, and I don't know if this actually can be balanced correctly and balanced well enough to the point that it should still be in the game. That's the issue I've been weighing on, and this is one where I really want to hear your guys' opinions. Do you think that the all items on all gods is something that could actually be balanced correctly in the long run? Do you think they could get there to where all of these items on any god is actually healthy enough that it can sustain the game? Or do you think that they could never get it to a healthy spot and that overall it might just ruin it to a certain degree? I want to know that from you guys, because it's something that, again, I've gone back and forth with in my own head, and I just can't come to a solid conclusion. I like so much about it and I hate so much about it. Overall, I think I would say, yeah, I want to see them actually tinker with it for at least a season until it gets through like season 1 maybe, and if they can't figure it out by then then maybe you call it quits. But for now, I do want to see them keep going with this and see if they can actually achieve it to a certain degree, because I think there's a lot of promise with it. But at the end of the day, it could just be another Hi-Rez mistake that we're seeing repeated in real time. But all that said, that's all the repeated mistakes that I have to talk about for you guys. So let's go ahead and I'll hit you with mine. When it comes to Hi-Rez and the job they're doing on Smite 2, I think overall it's very good, especially when you look at that first alpha weekend, which was the last time that I actually played Smite 2 up until this alpha. I think that they're crushing it. I think they've addressed a lot of the issues and it feels like Smite now. That's one of the biggest things. It feels like Smite. They've fixed the game feel. They've put so many Smite 1 items back in, and that's not something that was necessary, but they've done it and it does feel more like Smite for that reason as well. And I gotta give them props for that. I'm very proud to see them going in good directions. And when it comes to things like fixing the wards and fixing the towers, that's nice. But the fact that they have to do it at all is what worries me. Because here's why overall I really wanted to make this video. It's not because I was always remembering that remark that they were going to do strictly better and that they were going to learn from their mistakes. It wasn't just because I'm seeing these repeated mistakes, and even though they're fixing them, I wanted to point them out to you guys. No, it's at the end of the day because I want to see Smite succeed, and what worries me is they don't have the best timeline in the world. They're kind of rushing things, and when they're trying to make 2 new gods, or at least introduce 2 gods every single patch, that worries me that they might be rushing things too much and ignoring some of the fundamentals and forgetting their actual things that they've learned because they're rushing on those. Because at the end of the day, this is a game and it's a business. They have to make this succeed for them all to keep their jobs, to keep new players coming in, and to keep the lights on. And we have to keep that in mind. But if they're gonna do that, then they need to be efficient, and they need to actually remember those mistakes and those learnings just like they said that they would. And that's what I wanna see. And that's why I'm saying I'm making this video from a positive light, because I wanna see them take those mistakes. I wanna see them take that decade of learning and, like they said and like they promised, be strictly better. Because at the end of the day, I know Smite 2 could be undeniably better. Oh, by the way, I have a bunch of Smite 2 creator codes to give you access to the game. I'm going to have those linked in a pinned comment at the top of the comment section, so in case you don't have enough money to pay for a Smite 2 edition for yourself, then go down there. I have editions on Epic Games and on Steam and on PlayStation and on Xbox, so there should be like 4 to 5 for each of those platforms. I'm just going to put them literally all in that one comment because I've been really bad about putting them in other video comment sections, so I'm just going to put them there. Take one for yourself, give it to your friend, whatever. More people on Smite 2 is better in my opinion because I want to fight more people. So go ahead, take those codes, and hopefully you guys did enjoy the video. If you did, you want to leave me a like, subscribe, any of that stuff, I very much appreciate it. Usually I just make regular gameplay type videos. I'm going to keep making those, but I like to make little projects like this every now and again when I get the passion for it and I have a good idea. So hopefully you did enjoy, and hopefully you have yourself a great day.